In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 college basketball games happening on February 19, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start, if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Vermont versus UMBC. This matchup feels like a classic name brand versus live underdog spot in the America East, with Vermont, the longtime bully of the league, heading into UMBC's building as the team that is supposed to be in control from the jump. Odds makers are basically hinting that these two are close to equal on a neutral court, then leaning the line toward Vermont because of their history and the logo on the jersey more than anything that has happened over the past few weeks. That history is real. Vermont still has the shine of the program that has stacked up the most America East titles and that run of league dominance earlier in the decade, and that kind of respect tends to hang around in the market longer than you might expect. If you strip the logos away for a second and just look at this particular season, though, the gap gets a lot smaller and the picture looks much more balanced. Both teams live in a similar scoring range, hovering in that mid-70s neighborhood while allowing something close to the high 60s, and their efficiency profiles sit so close together that it feels fair to say they mirror each other, with Vermont a touch cleaner on the offensive side and UMBC a touch grittier defensively. They both lean into a controlled, measured tempo as well, not crawling, but comfortably in that middle lane where execution and patience matter more than raw speed or chaos. Honestly, the real separation here comes from how each side has been trending lately and where this game is actually being played. Vermont's recent body of work includes a heavy loss at home to Bryant and a surprising stumble on the road at Maine, mixed in with some solid wins, which makes their form feel more up and down than you would expect from a big favorite brand. UMBC, on the other hand, has quietly started to stack up confident conference wins, taking care of teams like Binghamton, Maine, and New Hampshire by solid double-digit margins. And when a group keeps doing that, it usually means the formula they are leaning on is starting to click. In the middle of that run sits the trip to Burlington, where UMBC went on the road and stayed inside the number in a grinding 64-55 battle against this same Vermont team, which is a nice live example that the on-court gap is tighter than the reputation suggests. Now the roles flip around. Instead of chasing a big number as visitors in Vermont's gym, UMBC slides into the short underdog role at home, with public reports pointing to no major injury concerns on either side and both teams expected to roll with their usual core rotations. Put all of that together and you get what feels like a coin flip in overall quality, tilted toward the side that has been playing sharper lately, leaning into its defense, and doing it in front of its own crowd, which is exactly the kind of scenario that often rewards the belief that the underdog can stay attached all game long. As our first pick for this matchup, the UMBC Retrievers to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. The scoring story between these two has a slightly different flavor, starting with that first meeting that played out like a slow burn, a 64-55 grinder that sat well below what most people picture when they think of modern college offenses trading blows. Odds makers still posted a fairly assertive total for the rematch, almost like a challenge, as if they were telling you not to get too comfortable assuming a repeat of that low-scoring script. On paper, both offenses are efficient enough that, if you plug their numbers into a basic projection and assume a normal night, the combined score you get usually lands higher than what we saw in that first clash. That creates a very normal temptation. You start to picture a few more jumpers dropping, a couple of extra threes falling, maybe some bonus trips to the free throw line, and suddenly the mind wanders toward a more open, higher scoring sequel. Conference rematches that actually matter in the standings often refuse to follow that daydream, though they tend to lean into longer possessions, more half-court sets, and a lot of late clock decisions that naturally squeeze how many points can be scored. That is exactly what happened in the first game, with both staffs clearly comfortable turning it into a possession-by-possession chess match instead of a free-flowing race, and that kind of strategic comfort usually carries over when the same teams see each other again. If you glance at the way these two usually play, both sit in that central band in terms of possessions per game, not painfully slow, but comfortably away from track meet territory. And that sort of tempo places a natural cap on how high the combined score can realistically climb unless one side catches absolute fire from the perimeter. There is also a pattern where games that feature this favorite profile, when they are expected to steer the tempo, often end up finishing a bit lower on the scoreboard than some raw models suggest, partly because they are willing to bleed the clock and lean on their defense when things tighten. UMBC's schedule shows something similar, with a few blowout wins that inflate totals, but when the matchups get more competitive, the results tend to settle into more modest scoring ranges rather than breaking into wild shootouts. Way pressure usually shaves a few points. Way pressure usually shaves a few points off expectations in meaningful rematches. And you end up with a picture of a game where points are earned the hard way and where a more controlled combined score feels slightly more natural than a sudden offensive fireworks display. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Florida International versus Liberty. Florida International heads to Liberty for this matchup on February 19, 2026. This game sets up like one of those meetings where both teams walk in with very different personalities and only one gets to decide the mood in the room. Liberty comes in as the more structured side, the group that treats each half-court trip like something they have to proofread before they hand it in. They value the ball, they run their stuff, and they are very comfortable living in that controlled environment for a full 40 minutes. Florida International leans into the opposite feeling, stretches of pressure and chaos where they want you to rush, to get sped up, and to make decisions a touch earlier than you really want to. It can feel fun and wild for a while, almost like a pickup game broke out inside an organized one, but that style can fade when the possessions stack up and the legs get a little heavy. Here is the thing, over a full game, the team that can force the other side to live by their rules usually has the edge against that kind of volatility. Liberty is built to do exactly that, guard without over-gambling, clean the glass well enough, and keep walking the game right back into their comfort zone. At home, with their crowd lifting them on every defensive stop and every long, patient possession, that steady approach tends to slowly press on the opponent, trip by trip. For a favorite that already likes structure, those final minutes often turn into a stretch where the gap widens as the more disciplined side keeps playing their way, while the other team is chasing. As our first pick for this matchup, the Liberty Flames to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Liberty may be methodical, but they are not shy about putting the ball in the basket when the shots are there. They are fine spacing the floor, moving the ball, and letting threes fly when a defense loses focus even for a second. If you have watched enough college basketball lately, you know how often a patient offense suddenly strings together a few clean looks from deep and flips the feel of a game in a minute or two. Florida International, with their pressure and their urge to run, naturally pushes the pace higher, turning missed shots or loose possessions into quick attacks and early clock chances. That kind of style usually means more total trips up and down the floor, more transition, and yes, more moments where defenders are a step late and have to reach, which adds free throws to the mix. Honestly, that is where modern college hoops loves to live, with spacing, tempo swings, and mini runs that can turn a steady game into a high-scoring one before you even look back at the scoreboard. In a matchup like this, where one team is comfortable hitting shots out of a slow build and the other thrives in faster, more chaotic stretches, there are simply more natural paths to a game that fills up the box score rather than one that stays quiet. And if things stay even late, those familiar closing sequences with quick fouls, fast possessions, and scramble scoring can stretch the total even further than it felt for most of the night. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Marshall versus Appalachian State. We are heading up to Boone, North Carolina, where the air feels a little thinner and Holmes Convocation Center acts like one of those small gyms that quietly eats visiting teams alive. The sidelines are a bit tight, the crowd sits close enough to make you feel every mistake, and that atmosphere really matters when the game already has some history baked in. This is a revenge spot with some bite, because Marshall grabbed the first meeting in Huntington, winning 88-81 by turning the whole thing into a track meet and letting it turn into a shootout from deep. App State had to wear that loss, then go right back to the grind of league play, which sometimes hardens a team more than a blowout win ever could. Since that night, the Mountaineers have climbed toward the top of the conference, sitting at 18-10 overall with a 10-5 mark in league play, and they have built a 10-3 record in this building that feels very real when you watch them close out games at home. Marshall arrives with a 17-10 overall record and 9-5 in conference, playing a style that feels like it belongs in a casino, push the pace, take quick shots, and live with the swings. They pour in close to 80 points a night and give up plenty on the other end, with recent games turning into the kind of high-scoring show that looks great on a scoreboard but also leaves you exposed if the shots suddenly stop falling. App State leans the other way and makes you work for every clean look, scoring around 71 a game while holding teams to about 64, and they force opponents into rough shooting nights with percentages hovering near 39% from the field and about 31% from three. On top of that, they control the glass by roughly 5 rebounds a night, which is not flashy, but over 40 minutes it feels like a slow leak for whoever is trying to upset them. That is the real tug of war here, because Marshall wants this thing in 6th gear, launching threes early in the clock and embracing chaos, while App State prefers a half-court fistfight at 3,333 feet where every cut feels like it goes uphill both ways. Honestly, that contrast in styles is half the fun for anyone watching and a headache for anyone trying to price the matchup. There is also the emotional side that numbers never quite capture, the memory of that January 3rd loss, the way a team remembers getting sped up, and the fact that App State has already seen Marshall's spacing and shooting patterns once. Now the Mountaineers get them in Boone, with their own crowd behind them, a small spread to work with, and a game script that favors the group that is more comfortable playing through contact and longer possessions when things tighten late. Let me explain it simply. The team that can slow the tempo without losing its identity usually has the edge when a matchup feels like it will live in that one-possession window for most of the night. As our first pick for this matchup, the Appalachian State Mountaineers to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. The first thing that jumps out when you think about the total is how wild that first meeting was, a 169-point explosion in Huntington, where Marshall got comfortable on its own rims and turned the whole night into open-court basketball. Both teams got dragged into that rhythm, and once a game starts racing like that, it often takes on a life of its own, a bit like a pickup run where nobody wants to be the first one to slow down. Since then, Marshall has kept leaning into that free-flowing style, playing games that land in that eye-catching range, 84-80 against South Alabama, 101-87 on the road at Georgia Southern, 81-79 at Old Dominion, 90-74 against Miami of Ohio, and 81-77 against Southern Miss. Those results stack up to an average in the high 160s, and they tell you that the Herd are very comfortable living in a world where every trip down looks like an invitation to shoot early in the clock rather than milk possessions. App State, on the other hand, has been living in a very different neighborhood on the scoreboard, with recent results of 58-69 at James Madison, 81-65 at Georgia Southern, 65-60 against Eastern Michigan, 65-57 versus South Alabama, and 66-44 at Troy. That cluster sits right around 126 total points on average, and when you look at those scores together, you can almost feel the pace slowing and the possessions compressing, like someone turned the game down from fast forward back to normal speed. Season long, the Mountaineers land in that mid-130s neighborhood for combined scoring, with about 71.2 points scored and 64.3 allowed, and that pattern of lower totals is not just a random one-week stretch. Marshall's season story trends higher, with their games hovering in the mid-150s range when you pair roughly 79.9 points scored with 74.8 given up, which fits what you see on film, a team happy to trade buckets if you let them. So the overall scoring expectations sit in a tug between those two worlds, the fireworks that Marshall brings and the quieter, controlled environment that App State prefers. Here is the thing, in Boone, App State usually drags opponents closer to its comfort zone on the scoreboard, and not many visiting teams manage to turn that building into a full-speed highlight reel for long stretches. They rebound well enough to finish possessions, they do not chase offensive boards recklessly, and those choices matter because they limit runouts and force more half-court sets, which naturally trims a few possessions off a game. That first 169-point clash came with Marshall at home, shooting in a familiar gym, and App State playing from behind, which is the perfect recipe for a high-scoring game, more urgency, quicker shots, and more chances for fouls and free throws late. On the road in Boone, that same script is a lot harder to replay because App can stay more patient, work longer into the shot clock, and make Marshall defend through multiple actions rather than just the first one. Projecting this forward, the Mountaineers have every incentive to fix what went wrong in that first matchup. Fewer live ball turnovers, less space given up to shooters early in possessions, and more possessions that look like long, deliberate trips instead of rushed pull-ups. Even with the usual late-game free throw parade that can pop up in close contests, that kind of approach tends to keep the combined score from soaring into the very high ranges that Marshall has lived in recently. With the market reacting to all those herd track meets, the expectation has inched higher, but there are simply more paths where this game plays closer to App State's recent totals than to Marshall's wildest ones. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. UNC Asheville versus High Point. This matchup feels like one of those classic conference spots where you find out if the underdog can hang around or if the home favorite just leans on them until it breaks open late in the night. UNC Asheville walks into the Cubine Center on Thursday, February 19, 2026 for a road date in High Point, North Carolina, with tip set in the evening and a real February conference grind vibe in the air. High Point comes in with a sparkling record, sitting at 24-4 overall and 12-1 in Big South play, right at the top of the league where everyone expected them to be once they found their stride. UNC Asheville, by comparison, has lived a much more uneven season, standing at 12-14 overall and 6-6 in the conference, which lands them squarely in that middle tier where every good night matters just to keep pace. Oddsmakers clearly respect what High Point has done, giving them the label of firm home favorite and asking them to win this thing by a comfortable margin in their own gym. The resume backs that posture up pretty cleanly, since High Point is pouring in about 91.8 points per game while giving up only around 70.5, which leaves them with the kind of nightly scoring cushion most coaches would happily frame on the office wall. They have only been clipped a handful of times all season, and only a couple of those slips happened in front of their home crowd, which says a lot about how tough that building can get once the students lock in behind them. UNC Asheville plays in a very different scoring neighborhood, averaging 73.8 points scored and 71.8 allowed, and that narrow margin shows how much they live on possession-by-possession detail rather than fireworks. The road has not exactly been kind either, with the Bulldogs sitting at 3-8 in true road games, which is the kind of mark that makes any big trip to a top seed feel a little heavier on the legs, and honestly on the mind too. The first meeting between these two told a pretty blunt story, with High Point walking out of Asheville with an 87-69 win and an 18-point gap that never felt like a fluke when you watched how often they got comfortable looks near the rim. That night looked like High Point renting space in the paint and refusing to give the keys back, which is usually what happens when a more explosive roster keeps getting downhill and the other side keeps having to reset its defense after made baskets. High Point likes to turn games into track meets, playing with tempo, attacking the lane, and using the three-point line as a weapon that bends the floor instead of a desperate bailout, and that shows up in their strong assist numbers as the ball zips around. UNC Asheville leans into a much more grind-heavy approach, living in that range where they are happiest if scores land in the 70s, slowing things just enough so that their better creators can pick spots in the half court and try to win one-on-one or two-on-two battles. When that works, it looks mature and patient. When it does not, it can look a little like walking uphill with a backpack, especially against a team that can explode in transition. Against the spread, the story still tilts toward the home side, with High Point sitting at 13-12 against the number and already having shown they can cover a few of those big tags that scare people off at first glance. UNC Asheville has been respectable in that department at 12-10-1 against the spread, but not exactly a wagon that bettors ride without thinking. Current injury and availability reports do not flag any major new absences that would reshape how either team plans to rotate its core pieces, so what you see in the recent box scores is broadly what you should expect in this one as well. The combination of High Point's explosive scoring profile, their proven ability to handle this exact opponent decisively on the road, their strong home form, and Asheville's shaky record away from home all point in the same direction toward a script where the favorite has multiple chances to build runs, stretch the lead, and keep the underdog in response mode rather than control mode. As our first pick for this matchup, the High Point Panthers to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. UNC Asheville's season numbers put them in that modest scoring band, with their games typically landing in the mid-140s when you blend what they score and what they allow, which fits the eye test of a team that prefers measured possessions and half-court work. High Point, on the other hand, lives on the other end of the spectrum, with their own average sitting closer to the 160s. When you add their 91.8 points scored to the 70.5 they surrender on a typical night, and that kind of profile tends to drag almost any opponent into a faster rhythm whether it wants it or not. The first meeting fits that pattern nicely, finishing 87-69 for a combined 156 points, and that happened on Asheville's floor where you might expect the pace to favor the home side at least a little. Moving this rematch into High Point's building gives their preferred tempo even more room to breathe, because home teams that already like to run often get just a bit more aggressive when they know every big run will bring the crowd to its feet. Honestly, those emotional waves matter for totals, since a couple of quick surges can turn a slow-looking night into a shootout in just 3 or 4 trips up and down the floor. Trend-wise, High Point has played in plenty of higher-scoring games, with their record sitting around 17-8 to the over on the season and 9-6 to the over at home, which hints that odds makers have often underestimated just how wild their games can become. UNC Asheville has quietly been friendly to higher totals on the road as well, landing around 8-3 to the over away from home, which suggests that once they leave their own gym, games tend to slip into a looser scoring environment. Some of that is probably simple human nature, because visiting teams often get dragged into whatever style the host prefers, especially when they are trying to play catch-up and start shooting earlier in the clock. The stylistic matchup feeds that idea, since High Point's attack is built to punish defenses that are solid but not elite, and Asheville's numbers paint exactly that picture, sturdy enough to compete but not quite built to smother a top-tier offense for 40 minutes. Once a game like this tilts toward the higher tempo side, possessions pile up, shots go up faster, and late-game situations with fouling, free throws, and rush threes can push point totals higher than they looked halfway through the first half. Market interest has often leaned toward expecting high-point games to land on the livelier side of things, and current information suggests no major offensive pieces are missing for either team, so there is not much reason to expect a suddenly cautious, low-scoring slugfest here. The most reasonable script has both teams pulled upward by the faster style, with High Point's pace and scoring gravity setting the tone and Asheville forced to keep answering on the scoreboard, which together points toward a game that clears a typical projection rather than tiptoes underneath it. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Monmouth, New Jersey versus UNC Wilmington. Monmouth walking into Wilmington feels like that classic scene where the visiting team knows everyone expects them to be the supporting cast, not the main story. UNC Wilmington has been that steady, reliable group at home, stacking wins, guarding their floor, and carrying themselves like a team that knows it is supposed to be favored in this spot. Monmouth, though, comes in playing its best stretch in a long time, with the kind of quiet confidence that shows up when a group has actually strung together results and not just good intentions. The matchup has a nice contrast that works in the underdog's favor. UNC Wilmington prefers a controlled game, built on discipline, rebounding, and squeezing value out of each possession, almost like a veteran poker player who never goes all in without seeing the board clearly. Monmouth is a little more willing to live in the gray areas, to scrap on the offensive glass, to create extra chances, and to turn stretches of chaos into small runs that keep them hanging around when logic says they should be drifting away. That mix of control against controlled chaos can frustrate a favorite, especially when the underdog accepts that every possession matters and is happy to drag things into the kind of grind that neutralizes pure talent and leans into effort and resilience. From a betting lens, the story gets even more interesting. UNC Wilmington has carried that aura of a strong team so often that the market has a habit of pricing them like a finished product, not a flawed college squad that can still play flat for a stretch or sleepwalk through a half. Monmouth has more of that scrappy profile, the team people overlook on paper that somehow keeps sneaking in through the back door when numbers people feel the ticket is already torn up. Those are the teams that quietly stack positive results against the spread, not because they are secretly elite, but because they fight possessions, value small runs, and refuse to go away when the building tilts against them. The rhythm of the game also leans into the underdog's cause. A favorite that likes control naturally slows things down, and fewer possessions mean every empty trip becomes heavier for the team that is supposed to pull away. Monmouth, with its willingness to chase loose balls, pick spots to push, and lean into defensive pressure at times, can nudge that rhythm just enough to keep the script jagged, not smooth. That kind of environment rarely leads to a comfortable rocking chair cover for the home favorite. It looks more like a game that swings between 6 and 8 points, dropping back down when the underdog strings together 2 good defensive stands or 3 tough drives to the rim. Honestly, it is the kind of setup where you can absolutely believe UNC Wilmington still finds a way to win while also feeling that the underdog hangs around just a little too long for anyone laying points to feel relaxed. Monmouth has the mentality and playing style that invites late drama, that annoying type of effort where you glance at the score with 2 minutes left and realize they are still very much inside the margin you expected them to break. As our first pick for this matchup, the Monmouth Hawks to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Both teams are capable of putting together honest scoring stretches, and neither identity screams rock fight from start to finish. Monmouth tends to play games where numbers on the scoreboard move at a steady rate, not in tiny drips, and UNC Wilmington adds a more polished, efficient layer to that picture, which is a good recipe for a respectable total. The styles mesh in an interesting way for points. Monmouth is comfortable pushing off missed shots, hunting early looks, and trusting that a game with some tempo suits them, especially when they can crash the offensive glass and extend possessions. UNC Wilmington likes to be more deliberate, but they are not shy about taking advantage when the game opens up for a few minutes, especially if Monmouth's decision to play with pace leads to long rebounds and quick outlets. You get that back and forth where a slower half-court set from the favorite turns into a quick response from the other side, and suddenly the scoreboard is rising in little mini waves instead of isolated splashes. Here is the thing, once both teams find their rhythm, it becomes very hard for this type of matchup to stay stuck in a low-scoring mudbath. Shots start to fall, confidence builds, and defenses relax for just long enough that a couple of clean perimeter looks or backdoor cuts turn into easy points. College games often hinge on 5-minute stretches where everything seems to find the net, and with these two profiles, those stretches feel more likely than not. Late game dynamics help the scoring case even more. If the gap is anywhere near respectable, it invites the usual pattern of fouls, free throws, and rushed possessions, which all tilt toward extra points in the final minute or two. Even if the earlier parts of the game stay balanced and measured, that end sequence can push the total across a number that looked secure for most of the night. Anyone who has stared at a scoreboard and watched a comfortable under suddenly turn into an over in 60 seconds knows how quickly those last few possessions can flip the narrative. Honestly, this matchup has that runs on both sides, whistles late, and just enough rhythm throughout kind of vibe that leans toward a higher scoring script rather than a sleepy, grinding one that never really gets going. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.